It was originally a Ford, as all Shelbys were. There was right around 100 modifications that Shelby did to a Ford Mustang to make the GT350. From an antique ball and chain to an expensive collection of motor cars, here are some of the most interesting things Rick Harrison has collected over the years in Pawn Stars. When you work at a pawn shop, you have two things you need to consider. First, you should be able to tell the value of the item someone is selling to you and whether it is worth the money. Secondly, you must figure out whether the item you are taking into your possession will have a market or will be dead stock. Rick Harrison at Pawn Stars has taken these points into consideration and ended up with a list of collectibles that is every buyer's dream. Without further ado, let's look at some of Rick's greatest buys in Pawn Stars. Imagine being in the shop one day and someone comes in with a ball and chain. I know you're wondering why this is such a rare item. Ball and chains were used by the police to hold prisoners in the olden days so that the prisoners could be released for activities such as farming and cleaning train rails. These things are so rare and precious, so Rick knows exactly what is on the table as soon as he sees it. Before he can talk business, he calls in an expert to help determine the authenticity of the ball and chain. In modern times, finding an original ball and chain is hard, as 90% of them are fake. The original ball and chain are unique in that they were handmade, with the chain links being individually crafted and then hammered shut together when they were still hot. The ball and chain is one item that caused a lot of misery to anyone who wore it. Such an item could fetch Rick up to $750, so he is quite excited. The person selling it says that he recently got married and is looking to part ways with the chain. Now that he has a life, he has also been a police artifacts collector for over 25 years. After Rick's expert confirms that Rick could get anything from $650 to $750 for the ball and chain, Rick decides to purchase it from the seller at $400. This is a deal that Rick knows will make him a happy man. If you grew up in the 60s, then you know how detrimental GI action dolls were in childhood. So when Rick comes upon a G.I. Joe nurse action doll from 1967, he instantly knows that this is the action figure of dreams. To emphasize how insane this action figure is, Rick didn't even know that it existed. Research shows that the G.I. Joe nurse action doll being presented before him was the only one ever made. Most people are familiar with other action figures, but this nurse is so rare, the seller says she had purchased it from an estate sale. An expert is called to determine the authenticity of the doll, and he confirms that it is G.I. Joe nurse action figure from the 60s. He also explains that the nurse action dolls were made to either carry a white or a green medic bag. The white one is rarer, making it more expensive. At this point, Rick is excited to have the piece, but he is also composed so the seller doesn't raise her desired amount. The bag alone is worth at least $250, so Rick is sure that the doll might fetch anywhere between $1,500 to $2,000. With this information in mind, Rick negotiates a deal for $800. Winston Churchill was a man who most people greatly admired and adored. To date, anything that's suspected to have belonged to Churchill collects quite a sizable amount of money. Due to this, a lot of memorabilia have been faked. So when a seller comes in claiming to have an original letter from Churchill, it's expected that Rick is somewhat cautious. He calls in an expert to examine the paper and the signature so he can confirm that he has the legit thing. Fine. The letter seems to have been written by a typewriter and has a lot of history. They're being turned down. Watermark in the paper is a high-quality British paper. It appears to be on Winston Churchill's personal stationery. The expert confirms that the spacing of the letters confirms that a typewriter had been used to write the letter. Further examination is done, and it is confirmed that the letter is an original piece written by Winston Churchill in 1950. Even the signature is revealed to have been done with Winston's pen, not an automatic modern one. The seller is excited about this and learns that his letter can fetch him around $1,800 to $2,000. However, he agrees to sell it for $800, making Rick's day. Sports have been a major event in the history of mankind. Many great legends and sports enthusiasts attend various games just to see the thrill that happens on the field. So hyped are sports that memorabilia relating to players is known to cost a fortune. So when Rick walks by an auction and finds a man selling not one but two Texas Stadium seats, autographed by Emmitt Smith, Michael Irvin, and Troy Aikman, he knows he has hit the jackpot. Emmitt Smith is considered the best running back of all time, so having his signature greatly appreciates the value of the seat. Realizing the potential of this seat, Rick parts with almost $2,000 and gets the seat, although the owner hoped for $3,000 for both seats. Later, Rick calls in the one and only Emmitt Smith to ascertain his signature on the seat. Luckily, the signature is authentic, and Rick is happy with his purchase. If you are enjoying this content, be sure to leave a thumbs up down below. On another day, someone enters the shop with a 1800s 40 cal pepper box handgun. Is Rick's friend, and he explains that he had gotten the pepper box at an estate sale, but he refuses to tell Rick how much he paid for it. Now, he wants at least $1,800 for the pepper box. First things first, Rick has to see whether the pepper box is working well. They agreed to meet later to test the rifle's performance at the range. Rick suggested shooting at a target they had set up. Despite the customary understanding that these rifles are more valuable when they remain unfired, Rick decided to fire the 200-year-old English rotating pepper box handgun. To him, using pine glasses with an Old English lager as a target seemed fitting. Upon close examination of the firearm, Rick found that all its mechanics functioned fine. After confidently firing it, he determined its value to be around $3,000. Considering this appraisal, Rick deemed the seller's request for $1,800 a reasonable offer. Both parties agreed, and a deal was struck. Rick asks his friend how much he had paid for the pepper box, and the friend confidently replies that he had paid $500. Rick agrees to pay the $1,800, but his friend has to buy lunch after making such a huge profit. The coffee revolution, if it can be called so, brought about the existence of strange coffee grinders. Some of these have become so expensive that they are considered a collector's dream. Rick comes across a unique sharp coffee grinder carbon from the Civil War era with an embedded coffee grinder flow. Yes, you heard that right, a Civil War rifle with a coffee grinder on its end. This rifle is not only unique to its creation period, but also for the coffee grinder on its butt. The idea of the coffee grinder was to provide the user with effectiveness when it came to grinding other cereals such as corn and wheat. Rick has heard about these guns, but knows that only one of them exists, and it is in a museum. Someone present this gun for sale makes him excited at the prospect of rewriting history, but he needs to ensure that he is dealing with something legit. Rick calls in an expert who determines that the weapon is legit and could be worth over $70,000. The seller had been asking for $10,000. The gun is an original one, made from authentic parts in the 20s, but it also means that it had been off the radar since 1920. After much deliberation, Rick decides to buy the gun for a whopping $35,000. He believes that he will fetch a substantial amount of money for such an incredible historic piece. Another antique coffee grinder from the 19th century lands on Rick's lap. The seller had obtained it from his uncle, who works at the sanitation department, where he picks up a lot of stuff. Fäusel stuff. So he is sure that what he has is authentic. In the second half of the 19th century, Chicago was a leader in producing items made out of steel or cast iron, lasting all the way to the 70s. Such items can collect a pretty penny at the market, and that's what happened with Rick. Watch further on to find out. The seller wants $500 for the coffee grinder, but Rick refuses to pay that amount. He explains that he will have to spend around $300 to $400 getting the coffee grinder dusted and powdered to be better. The seller agrees to the deal and gets his $200. Rick takes the grinder to the one person he trusts to make the grinder eye-catching. This is an antique coffee grinder. My uncle works at the Department of Sanitation. He picks up a lot of stuff. And about 5 years ago, he gave this to me. Restoring the coffee grinder proves to be a tedious task, as it involves tearing apart the grinder to clean and paint the parts. Eventually, Rick gets his appealing coffee grinder and pays $350 for the cleanup process. He knows that the grinder will give him about $2,500, so this is a good investment. Can you imagine it? $200 for purchase and $350 for restoration. Rick will make over $1,500 in profit for this piece. The last piece is probably the most interesting piece of all. Matchbox cars from 1953 to 1969. A man walks in dragging a go-kart with storage boxes. He then reveals them to be Matchbox cars dating from 1953 to 1969. These are a car enthusiast's wet dream, and most of these are in mint condition. Some have never been taken out of their boxes. Seeing this huge collection instantly makes Rick excited and nervous at the same time. The seller explains that he has collected almost all of the Matchbox cars produced and that he had started collecting when he was a small boy. He continues to show his 1,000 pieces, with nearly 600 of them still contained in their boxes. Matchbox had altered their cars in 1970 to try and compete with Hot Wheels, and this only added value to the cars. In case you don't know, Matchbox cars are replicas of real automobiles. So having them is like having tiny vehicles on your desk. This is quite impressive. Since these cars ceased being created, getting a piece from that time is guaranteed to cost you a hefty sum. The seller knows how valuable his items can be, so he is not willing to negotiate anything below $20,000. For this, Rick decides to call in his expert before parting with that amount of money. The expert examines the cars and confirms that they are all collectibles from before 1970. The expert determines that the cars are worth $75,000 in the current market. Armed with this information, the deal is sealed and Rick takes the Matchbox cars. From a rare coin that goes back to a legendary owner who traveled the seven seas in the 18th century. Captain Cook worked his way in the annals of history to be one of the greatest ship captains ever. It looks like maybe it attached to a ribbon, to a rare Olympic ticket stub that has the signature of not one but two boxing greats. And I know the signature's right off the bat. That's a Vanderhole filled with Mike Tyson. 1988, they were both the creme de la creme of heavyweight boxing. It's definitely cool. So what are you looking to do with it? I've had a long time. Think I'm ready to sell it. Here are the most unique treasures ever discovered on Hardcore Pond. Firstly, let's examine the Captain Cook medal that Jeff found in his grandmother's belongings back home. Okay, so what do we have over here? Rick expressed that he wasn't totally sure, but he had a brewing suspicion that this was one old, and perhaps more interestingly expensive coin. This was perhaps because it had the image of King George V on it on one side, and the image of Jaime's Resolution on the other side. However, before it disappeared, it was noted to be the preferred ship of Captain James Cook, the famous British naval officer and explorer whose tales of his 3 expeditions in the Pacific Ocean and to Australia and New Zealand were made on the HMS Resolution. Surely anything that was made in reference to him would bring in a pretty penny, way more than the $50 that Jeff thought he was taking home. In order to learn the true value of the coin before them, Rick decided to consult with a coin expert. Upon seeing the coin expert was also struck with excitement the moment he laid his eyes on the coin. Not only were they legal tender, but they were also said to represent the goodwill of King George VI in Britain to the local chiefs and leaders. To everyone's shock, the coin experts valued the coin at a whopping $8,500. After realizing, Rick was quick to make the first move. Considering that Jeff would have been happy to walk out with enough money to get a happy meal, he thought it was fair that he made an offer of $5,000. With a smile on his face, Jeff took the $5,000 home. Do you think that was a fair offer? Let us know in the comments below. Next up, let's take a look at this Jim Dolly painting this kid Ron brought over to Rick. Pretty awesome, right? Got this painting for you. It's a Jim Dolly painting. Where did you get it? My dad was a mover. Guy decides to tip him out with this painting. This was a tip? Wow. What's even better is that apparently his dad got the painting because his dad was a mover and one of his clients gave it to him as a tip after a job. Can you believe that? Jim Daly is an American post-war and contemporary painter, and his work is well respected in the art scene today. Ron was trying to start his own business, so he was hoping to get some capital with the money he received from this deal with Rick. Hopefully he could get the $13,000 he had in mind. Rick is definitely impressed by the art piece, and if it isn't a print, Ron might have something valuable here. Upon hearing Ron's evaluation, Rick went to grab his friend Brett so that he could confirm if it was a print. Brett, who is an art expert, took a closer look and determined that it was an original. Awesome, even more awesome for Ron. Brett informed them that it was worth $10,000, $15,000. Incredibly, Rick offers Ron $6,000. Come on, man. Despite Ron's insistence, Rick and Ron were able to come to an agreement for $6,500. Moving on, let's take a look at the Gretsch electric guitar. How long have you had him? I've had him for 4 years. He passed 4 years ago. Whoever had them enjoyed them, for sure. Finding themselves in tough times, this family sought to alleviate some of the pressure by selling some of their most valuable belongings. Among such items were a pair of Gretsch electric guitars that they had received from a relative. Although they were heartbroken to part from it, they were happy to take the $1,800 that Seth offered them. Amazingly, Seth soon discovered that the guitar was way more valuable than he bought them for, and rather than keeping the profits for himself, he decided to call the family back so that he could give them an additional $1,000. Hopefully, this additional money would help them through this difficult time. Now let's shift our attention to a unique artifact. Take a look at this massive egg. So what exactly is this? This is an elephant bird egg. They know they dig these things up, and they piece them together from several eggshells. We do have an actual elephant bird egg. It is a composite. Who knows how many different eggs this thing is made of? Rather than using it to make breakfast for her entire extended family and their neighbors, Diana saw it fit to bring this bad boy to Rick to see what it may be worth. A collector of rare items and artifacts, Diana had been in possession of the egg for more than a decade, and now she believed it was time for others to enjoy the rare item. Rick identified that this was an elephant bird egg, but was wary of it because many have tried to pass off fakes of this egg for years. Some even went as far using porcelain to deceive others. Fortunately, Rick knew an expert that could not only confirm the authenticity of this egg, but he could also give them the true value of such a rare object. After confirming that a baby elephant bird must have once lived in this egg, the paleontologist was also able to determine that such a rare egg was worth about $5,900. That's way yummier than an omelette. Considering that Diana only thought that the egg was worth $2,500, he felt that an offer of $2,800 was fair enough for Diana to part ways with her rare egg. Seeing that Ricky wasn't going to budge, Diana was compelled to accept this offer, and gladly too. Now she can spend the money adding even more awesome things to her collection. Turning our attention to something out of this world, let's take a look at this meteorite that this man is trying to sell to the pawn shop for almost $5,000. Although the store did not deal with rocks, they were able to realize that if this meteorite was somehow older than the planet, they may have one very valuable item in their hands. Upon analysis, an expert disclosed that the rock was worth $4,000 because it was pretty old. Upon hearing this, the store made an offer of about $1,800. Understandably, our rock owner wanted a bit more for his rock, so he was somewhat pleased when he got $2,100 for his beloved rock. Do you think that was a fair deal? Next up, we take a look at a family heirloom that Davy was forced to sell because he's strapped for cash. Believing this rare kunzite was worth about $15,000, Davy was hoping he could finally get the money he needed to get rid of his financial problems. Although Rick is impressed by the gemstone, he needed some confirmation as to if this gem was truly the authentic item. Although Davy joked about being hurt that Rick doesn't trust him, he too wanted to know what the experts would say. A few minutes later, Rick's gem expert quickly confirmed that this was indeed a natural kunzite and was worth $9,600. Upon hearing this, Davy insisted that he still wanted about $15,000 for it. Rick, however, was ready to fork out only about